Good afternoon. We'll be beginning with the sessions from today, and what we will try understanding in this GS session on answer writing is how previous year questions had been framed. So I've designed it like this. What I checked is I've taken out, when we look at GS answer writing, economics, and of course I will be covering with you questions on agricultural economics or agriculture in general also. So paper 3, the questions that they have asked us on economy and the questions that they have asked us on, good afternoon Rahul, good afternoon all. I again initiate that what we will discuss today first is understanding how I will cover the course with you. So economics in agriculture and agricultural part, both will be covered, that we will go ahead and do them by. And we will try understanding, how to structure our answer. See, knowledge base, of course, we will try developing, but along with development of knowledge base, एक तो हुआ अकल ले, knowledge ले, तो knowledge base we have to develop, that take the knowledge that we needed to answer this question. I will keep telling you the sources also. I will tell you which source to use and so on, Along with that, good afternoon all who are joining. I hope the voice is now audible. So along with the knowledge base, we will try mainly focusing on the structuring part of the answer. So from paper 3, what I have covered is around 55 questions that I have taken from past year papers. I have not gone beyond 2010. This has been my domain, 2010 to 2019. I have not gone beyond 2010 because I thought that, it's nice to see you all too, Sonali. Thank you for saying this. So, so I have not been able to attend your class, to cover up on things here. So what I'll try doing is, we will try attempting these 55 questions, 10 to 19. Questions before 2010 become pretty outdated for our use today. So my suggestion to you is also that do not take your questions before 2010. Keep them till 2010. And then, good afternoon all who are joining now. And then, next 55 questions I have taken, and these questions can be 60 also, as current affairs, and then topics like fiscal policy, monetary policy, agriculture, reforms, mainly industrial reforms, and so on, foreign trade. All these topics I have tried covering with you: poverty and inequality, capital markets. So, these are certain topics I have tried covering with you in these 55-60 questions, so that, we are able to understand how UPSC can ask us questions. So the first half, the first 6-7 classes that I will have with you, maybe 8-9 if required, I am in no hurry at all. We will try covering these 55-60 questions of past year. And in the next 7 sessions that we will have, 7-8 sessions, the second half, we will try covering the other 55-60 questions that I would have planned for you. My suggestion is that please join the Telegram group that we have created specifically for this purpose. Please do join that Telegram group. We will keep that group a little active with question answer discussions and so on. And there also, I can keep helping you by suggesting what you can read and how you can read it and so on. Apart from if by chance you are with me on my Telegram group, it's completely fine. But even otherwise, even if you are there on my Telegram group, still I suggest that till the course duration goes on, please be on the Telegram group that we have created for you with the Next IAS group that we have done. So the course group will have its own importance. So please be there till the course goes on. It will help you certainly. Now, thank you. It's nice to see you too, Shrikant. Always nice to listen to you. Yes, Tushar. When I refer to the students in the classroom, what I will do is I will tell you the question asked by the student. I think that will help you all to connect with what I am answering. I know sometimes it can be disruptive, but that is how modern technology is now left us with, that we are not, together. It's quite unfortunate. I would love to see you all in front of me and then interact with you, but that is how we are left at the moment. So what I will do is, I will always come over and talk to you on that. So I'll tell you the question that are being asked and I'll tell you the answer to that. The channel, the link of that channel on Telegram, what you can do is you can use the Next IAS, email that you must have received, or I will ask them to email to you the link, and I think that way we can be approaching it. So I will ask the team to help you regarding, some of you are asking me that what is the channel name and what is the Telegram link. Difficult to do that right now in the class, but what we will do is I will share that link with you in the Next IAS class that I'll ask the Next IAS team, they will help you surely and send you links through emails and so on. I think that way you will be able to join the group, I'm sure. Now see, when we talk of the mains group is already there, Amal. The Telegram link for Next IAS mains group is already there. It's already, the people who are in that group are already there in it. So if you are there, you must join that. That's a separate group for mains optional people. For GS people, this group will be there. Okay, as I told you all, I repeat again, the Telegram group will give you the details, and the team will help you on that. And by tonight, you will be helped. And please join that group. It will help you because we will keep that group active for the course duration. And using that group, I can keep telling you what to read and where to source it and so on. Okay. Now we begin with questions. And I repeat again, when we begin with questions, we will be mainly, interested in understanding structuring of the question, content of the question, what should have come in introduction, what should have come in conclusion, how the question could have been asked. And along with that, we will also be interested in finding out what can be the current genesis of that question, that in this year or in future years, what can they ask us? Especially in this given year, because when you look at UPSC questions framed from the dynamic part, they will always frame it considering something or the other that may have happened in the current year. So whatever has happened in the current year, they frame it like that. Now, the next thing about the aspect, that is how we will cover it. So I will take it year-wise first with you. All right. So what we will do is that we will start with 2019 question paper. And we will try covering the questions from 2019 question paper. I'll keep writing the questions and then I'll keep teaching you the answers that you should have written along with that. So 2019 onwards, we will go ahead and do it. Along with that, what I will do with you in the class is that once I reach my questions, and at the end of each class, before the end of each class in fact, you will get the PDF link of the questions to be discussed. So 10 questions link you will get today and another 14 you will get tomorrow. So you will get the link of the questions that I will be discussing. So you see the link, that link will have questions as well as detailed answer to those questions. The link will have questions as well as detailed answer to those questions. Jay has helped me a lot in answering these questions, that is drafting them and so on. So, we'll develop it like that. And all answers I have drafted in a manner where it can help you in not only how to write in the paper, but mainly about even the knowledge content base. So sometimes the questions can have more answers can have more words than what UPSC asks for. Do not bother. The more words are there, because we need to make sure that we have all the content that is needed to answer those questions. Now, if you look at it here, what we will try taking it through, in this manner is this. We will try understanding it with questions. I'm starting with 2019. So the first question I start with is, it says, enumerate all indirect taxes which have subsumed. So subsumed in GST. This was the first part. Enumerate all indirect taxes subsumed in GST. And then they say, also comment on revenue implication of GST introduced in India since 2017. Explain on, this is the key word, revenue implication of GST in India. So, this is the key word I'm looking for, if you ask me. And the question was for 10 marks. We will try understanding if it is for 10, if it is for 15, how can we moderate our answers. But given that I'm writing, so all answers have to be planned mentally between 150 to 250 words. Whenever you are planning an answer mentally, whenever you are practicing on your own, whenever you are making the structure of an answer, plan your answer in that 150 to 250 words. That is how you should be planning your answers. Alright, that plan your answers over 150 to 250 words. No, Ayushi, this is not a recorded class. I am with you live right now. I can see what you are writing. I can hear. I can absorb and I can answer. So feel free to ask your doubts. I am around. I can answer your questions if you have any. So when we come back to the point again, the question asks here, enumerate all indirect taxes subsumed under GST. So see, before GST we had excise duty, center and state, sales tax, center and state, customs duty, entertainment tax, and so on. Now they say enumerate which taxes have been included. An easier way to answer this question, when you structure this question, that's what I'm telling you. So begin with an introduction. So when you talk about the answer structure, that how should we structure our answer, begin by introduction. And I have already given it to you in the PDF in written form. I'm discussing it with you right now. So when you talk about the introduction part here, you can write GST was introduced in July 2017 and subsumed all indirect taxes of central and state government prevailing in India till then. GST was introduced in July 2017 and subsumed all indirect taxes prevailing in India of central and state government till then. The only exemptions were given. So you know what I'm trying to approach? You are answering the question, but you are answering the question by covering the exemptions. So that way you will give a message to the examiner that, look, I'm fine here. I understand that these taxes have been subsumed, and I also understand which have not been. So then you say, below that you write, except tax on indirect tax or VAT on petroleum products, alcohol for human consumption, land and electricity. Then write, GST has subsumed other effective taxes like central and state excise duty, central and state sales tax, entertainment tax, etc. So that way what happens is that in an exam, you don't have to mug up all the taxes that GST has subsumed. It's not possible, one, or not required, because you will be marked out of 5 in this, or 3, 4 in this. So for 3, 4 marks, you should not end up mugging up all possible taxes that have been subsumed. But if you answer like this, you are telling the examiner that I already know which taxes have been subsumed, and I also know which have not been subsumed. So in that case, when you answer like that, this introduction should include all taxes which have been included as subsumed, and should include exemptions. So again I repeat, there are 4 exemptions we are looking at in this case. We have not included the tax on petroleum product. Remember, state governments are still allowed to charge their own state VAT on petroleum product. That is why you will see petrol or diesel price differing in Delhi or UP or Haryana because of the different sales tax that are being charged in these products, on these products. And then alcohol. But remember, in case of alcohol, it is only alcohol for human consumption. So petroleum products, then alcohol. And in case of alcohol, it is only alcohol for human consumption. That has been kept exempted. Then land. Remember, in case of land, every state charges a stamp duty, a registration tax. Now, ideally, it should have been a part of GST. But then states put a pressure. They said that we are already sacrificing all our taxable possibilities and all our taxable resources. So we don't want to sacrifice further taxable resources of ours, and hence we will not be willing to sacrifice these. And along with this, one more that has not been put under GST is electricity. So remember, these are the 4 exemptions that we have. ये 4 groups ऐसे हैं जो नहीं हैं GST के अंदर covered. इन पे स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स को अलाउड है कि वो अपने टैक्सेस लगा सकते हैं. तो ये 4 ग्रुप्स नहीं हैं जीएसटी के अंदर. इसका मेजर कारण ये रहा कि स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स अपनी सारी टैक्स करने की कैपेसिटी नहीं सैक्रिफाइस करना चाहते थे. The major reason these exemptions were there was because state governments did not want to sacrifice all their capacity to tax. Now, when you look at it, or per se when we go for it, the question says, and that is what the important aspect is, that explain revenue implication of GST in India. Now think, if we think about revenue implication of GST in India, part of GST now, all professional taxes part of GST, they will be, if those professional taxes have to be paid indirectly, will be part of GST within that. So when you look at the revenue implication, please understand it like this. Why was this question asked? That is, that is the first question. That why did they ask us about revenue implications? The Shubhankar asks me a question that whether we can mention alcohol as liquor. You can mention it, but better if you mention alcohol, because alcohol is what is used for different purposes. And Saurabh asks me, that is customs duty is still levied. Customs duty is still levied, Saurabh, but it is kept 0 rated, so all GST payment is given back for it. So it's levied, yes, but it's been kept 0 rated, so all GST payments are paid back for it. All right, so under input tax credit, it gets covered. Now, coming to the discussion here, revenue implications. Last year was the first time when central government found it very difficult to pay GST compensation to states, and the complaints had started from the states. That central government is not paying GST compensation to us. So understand the history of it. In 2017, when GST was introduced, it was introduced with a clause that central government will compensate state governments at the rate of 14% increment in their tax collection per annum for the first 5 years. That is 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, 21-22. For the first 5 years, central government will compensate the state governments at an increment of 14%. This is what was decided among central and state government at the time of discussion. Then after that, when we took it further, so after that, central government had been compensating the state governments at the rate of 5%, 14% every year, assuming that it will cover for nominal GDP growth. But if you recall 2018-19 onwards, India entered into a slowdown. Our GDP growth started falling. Understand this, is baat ko samajh ke rakho, that slowdown means your GDP growth rate is still positive, but at a declining rate. So if my GDP increased at 18% and then next year at 14%, then I'm in a slowdown. And recession means that my GDP is declining, that I have negative GDP growth. So slowdown means my GDP is growing, but growing at a slower rate. Recession means my GDP has declined, negative growth. In that context, understand one more thing. That is, recently we are reading news which says for the first time India has had technical recession. Please understand that. It doesn't mean India never had recession in the past. When we use the term technical recession, what it only means is that technically recession is defined as a situation, technically recession is defined as a situation in which you have 2 successive quarters of negative growth of GDP. So, technically recession is defined as a situation in which we have 2 successive quarters of negative growth of GDP. That is a technical recession. India started recording quarterly data only from 1996 onwards, mid-90s. So quarterly data was otherwise not recorded in India before 1990s. So before 1990s, in 1973, 1979, 1973, 1957, we have had our bouts of recession. But that recession was the annual GDP growth becoming negative. So that meant that over 4 quarters GDP fell and annual GDP growth was negative, and we had recession in India in the past. This recession that we are talking now about is technical recession. That is 2 successive quarters of negative GDP growth. So when you read it in newspapers, that is it the first time that India has a technical recession, right? Because technical recession means quarterly growth becoming negative. Since we did not measure quarterly growth earlier before mid-90s, and this is the first time after 1979 that our GDP growth has declined or become negative, that we are using the word technical recession for the first time in India. Otherwise, India has had 3 earlier recessions, and those recessions were due to some poor policies we were making and so on. So we will cover this up much better when I'm teaching you a few things on growth and policy making, but keep it in mind because in newspapers you will keep hearing these and the doubts will keep emerging. Now, it becomes relevant for GST because your indirect tax collection is heavily dependent on your economic situation. If your economy is doing well, if GDP is growing at a faster pace, then in that case your indirect tax rates, collecting tax at the same rate, will keep giving you higher and higher level of revenue. On the other hand, if your GDP is not rising and your GDP starts falling, for example, in 2018, if you have a GDP of say rupees 100 and say your tax is 10%, then you collect 10 rupees tax in 2018. In 2019, if your GDP rises to 120, your nominal GDP, then even at the tax of 10%, that rises to rupees 12, your tax collection. So a 20% increase in GDP, keeping the tax rate same, has given you a 20% increase in tax collection. See that? So that is how it happens if GDP keeps growing. But imagine now, if in 2020, and this year has actually played 2020 with us now. So in 2020, if your GDP comes down to 105, then your tax collection becomes 10.5 a minus 1.5 here because your GDP also came down by a minus 15 rupees here. So a fall in GDP will create that problem. Then imagine now, if you understand this example that I give you, I'm sure you will understand the point that now think if GDP growth, nominal GDP growth, that is GDP in money terms, if GDP growth doesn't happen at 14%, 14% per annum, then central government will find it very difficult to compensate the state governments at the rate of 14% per annum because the tax collection will not be at that rate. And that is why in 2019, this debate became quite huge that, the lack of GDP compensation by central government is compromising states' government's capacity to fund their expenditures. That is why UPSC put this question in the paper. They asked you this question that first they asked a very, innocuous question that which taxes have been included in GST. We answered that on the previous page and we said that it will include all indirect taxes and it doesn't include the ABCD that we wrote. And then the question was that what is the value, what is the revenue implication of GST? Now, when it comes to revenue implication of GST, so the revenue implication of GST can go like this. We try understanding that. We will say that GST's revenue implication has not been as strong as what was expected. Has not been as strong as what was expected. So revenue implication has not been that strong as what we expected it to be. For example, so we'll go like this. We'll say GST was expected to generate revenue at the rate of 14% addition per annum. That was the basis of compensation promised to states rather. And in the notes that I have given you, in those notes I have not mentioned these. I expect you to attend the class or see the video later on and then answer these per se. There are two questions I see. I'll answer them and then go ahead. One question is from where we can find PDF of model answers. So you will have the PDF option, Simran, on the Next IAS app, and you can access it there from where you have accessed this part. And there's another question that has been asked. When newspaper mentions GDP growth, this is Rishi asking me, when newspaper mentions GDP growth at 7%, is it real or nominal? It is real growth, Rishi. Whatever you see mentioned in newspapers as 7%, 5%, 4%, they mention the real GDP growth. Add to that inflation and you get the nominal GDP growth. Alright, that is how GDP growth is covered in newspapers, etc. Coming back now, so in the answer sheet that I have given you, one of the parts also records the benefits given to India. Please listen to this carefully. When you will see the answer PDF, there are 4 or 5 benefits enlisted of GST giving those benefits to India. Those benefits are there as the content part. Alright, so when you get ahead in your answer, you will first write this. This was expected. Then you will write benefits of GST. And there are benefits expected of GST, like why did we expect this 14% addition? Please understand, that is why this benefit part comes in. That how did we assume that there will be a 14% addition to to tax collection of India, given that the nominal GDP growth of India is at a particular pace. That what is the rate of that GDP. Ankit asks me, should we stop reading newspaper now? No, Ankit. I suggest you should read newspaper till at least 10th, 12th December for mains exam preparation, and then maybe you can stop it. And then also, if possible, keep going through the headlines. All right. that applies to all of you. Those of you who are appearing mains exam, I suggest keep reading the newspaper till 10th, 12th December, and then you can stop reading it, but still if possible, go through the headlines or the major events, because the mains exam will be a continuity that you will face. So they won't expect you to have stopped reading newspapers. They will expect you to write the answers of current events based on what has been till one day before. So in that sense, it will keep you properly connected. But yes, I know that time is a constraint. Keep it till 10th to 12th December. Now, when we come to this part, the benefits of GST, it comes like this. Just to clarify one thing, Saptarshi asks me also that nominal GDP is nothing but real GDP growth, that is nominal GDP growth rate, is real GDP growth rate plus inflation. Alright, this is rate of inflation plus rate of nominal GDP growth is rate of real GDP. Real GDP plus inflation is nominal GDP growth rate. Yes, Noor, I'll help you incorporate the diagrams or tables in your answers, that how you can do that. As the question demands, we will come to that. We will be definitely covering that up, that how do we cover for things, on diagrams and tables. Coming back to this, then, mention the benefits of GST here. So the benefits of GST that you can mention here can come across as higher buoyancy, because tax buoyancy of GST becomes high, because better trail of improved input tax credit comes in. So we'll take it as this. Higher buoyancy. Buoyancy of a tax is nothing but the rate of increase in tax collection compared to rate of GDP growth rate. Alright, so that is called the buoyancy of the tax. This is rate of growth in tax revenue. किस रेट पे मेरा रेवेन्यू बढ़ रहा है, ठीक है, या घट रहा है, बट चेंज हो रहा है. तो रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ इन टैक्स रेवेन्यू, किस रेट पे मेरा टैक्स रेवेन्यू बढ़ रहा है, कैसे मेरे टैक्स रेवेन्यू में इंक्रीज आ रहा है. सो द रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ इन टैक्स रेवेन्यू divided by rate of growth of GDP. Rate of growth in tax revenue divided by rate of growth of GDP. If this is greater than 1, less than 1, if this is less than 1, then we assume our tax is not buoyant. And if this is greater than 1, if this is greater than 1, then tax revenue growth is higher than the rate of growth of GDP, and that is called buoyancy. Alright, so this is rate of growth of GDP higher than the rate of growth of economy. So I see two questions again, three rather. One is, can center deny to pay GST compensation? We will discuss it, Divyansh. Kindly wait on that. That can center deny GST compensation or not? Is it necessary to always write answers in point form in economics, or we can afford some paragraph based answers? You can afford paragraph based answers. It will depend on how you are structuring your answer. But it's always better to represent it point form, the way I'm trying to teach you, because it helps examiner get the hang of it much better. Another is GST will generate revenue in addition of 14%. So 14% is the extent of growth rate in GDP, and then GST covering a little more than 14%. That is the way it goes. Saurabh asks me to go faster. Yes, Saurabh, let all of us get used to each other better, and you will see me going faster. Don't worry about that. I fully understand, and I will be covering all the topics with you. The topics are already planned in my mind. I have no gumptions. If it needs us an extra class here, maybe 16th or a 17th class, I have planned it over 15 classes. But if it needs us to take 16 or 17 classes, I'm willing to do that. So don't worry about that at all. But I think in 15 sessions we should be able to finish it. But topics will be covered. Don't worry at all. All right, now we come back to the point here. Tax buoyancy at 1 is not necessarily ideal. Normally people look for a tax buoyancy greater than 1. That is only if the tax is buoyant, that when it is greater than 1, that your tax collection is rising at a faster rate than GDP growth, which means the tax has been planned in this manner that people are willing to pay this tax and the government is able to collect this tax better. Now, why did we expect GST to be buoyant? We expected GST to be buoyant for reasons. The reasons are, yes, 2 lines are enough to answer the first part. Don't worry, the structure when I'll teach you, I keep that in my mind. So and it's not 2 lines actually, you are answering it, even talking about the exemptions of each. So you are answering around 40 words on that. So go for the words, how many words you can write. Then when we come to this, please understand the point now. Why did people expect GST to be buoyant and beyond 14%? So buoyancy of GST was expected because 1, with input tax credits in picture, that is whatever tax you pay, you can charge a input tax credit, that is you will be given back the tax that you had already paid on inputs that you had purchased. So that was more incentive for people to report the previous transaction. So you get a trail of all transactions and that can contribute to buoyancy. Secondly, with the introduction of e-way bills. So when e-way bills comes across, so when the e-way bill comes across, it implies that now again better recording of transactions in transportation of commodity from one place to another can be recorded. Even the transporters have an incentive to now record and report to the government what transactions are taking place, and that helps in contributing to your GST revenue, and that again gives it a buoyancy possibility. Other possibility is that transaction time will be reduced. Now with octroi duty, entry tax removed, more transactions can take place, and when more transactions will take place, better revenue can be generated. Then another is that it will also encourage interstate transactions to be faster. So with all this, it was expected that GST will result in better reporting, better revenue generation, and higher GDP growth, which will contribute further to tax creation, tax revenue collection. One of you asked me, Shruti asks me this, that tax growth is dependent on GDP, so the rates will change accordingly. How buoyancy changes? Please understand, it's not only whether your GDP is increasing which will decide whether your tax revenue is increasing. When your GDP increases, along with that, how much incentive do people have to pay tax? How much of the GDP increase can be recorded in the taxable net? And what revenue can you generate from the extra GDP is what matters. So if your GDP increases by 10%, but the taxable part of that GDP rises at a faster pace, then you can collect more tax compared to what you did earlier with the same rate of rise in GDP. So please understand it like that. Now, when we talk about the things here, Varada, don't worry. I know you have your state PSC exam. You will get the video recordings of all these classes. So even by chance, if you miss a class, your video recordings will be there. Don't worry at all. Now, when we come back to this discussion here, after having written the benefits of GST, then what you should do is you should move on to the performance of GST. What is the performance of GST? So when it comes to performance of GST, (2017-18), 2018-19, and 2019-20, if you take it as increase in growth rate or increase in GST revenue, that what has been the growth or increase in GST revenue, then in that case, it will come like this. 2017-18, we had an 18% growth. 18-19, it came down to approximately 16% growth. And 1920, it was approximately 13% growth. So GST growth, revenue growth has been declining. It's not that growth has not been happening. GST growth has been happening, but revenue growth has been declining year on year, every year that we see it. There is one request. When you say central applied same tax for every state, in what basis dimension required? Same tax, the whole idea of GST is this, that same tax applied everywhere, so that the consumer who consumes in India gets it as one nation and one market. There should not be separate markets for each. And another question I see is, what is the tax buoyancy right now? It is 1.07 right now, 1.07. For this year, it will be less than 1. We don't know as yet, but this will be less than 1. Another question you asked me is that, has the tax buoyancy really improved with GST? Tax buoyancy has improved quite drastically with GST. For all said and done, and whatever you keep reading across, when you compare the tax collection before GST and tax collection after GST, it has increased by more than 75%. So it's a huge increase when it comes to tax revenue collection pre and post GST. Rates of automobiles different in different states. That's because it is not under exemption. Do not bother about that. It is not under exemption, but rate of automobiles, but different dealership networks have their own charges and own price that they fix across different state groups that they charge it as. So it's not under exemption, but input costs, etc., play their own role. Now, coming to this, again, when you talk about the growth rate of GST and the revenue generated from there, this fall in revenue has been there because there can be more improvements that we can make. And these improvements is what we need to understand. And all these increases are year on year. They are not from only the base year, they are year on year. So this is increase as compared to this year, this is increase as compared to this year. So all year on year increase in GST. So when you look at the reasons why GST could not do well, now in my answer what I have done, and that's what you should do, write a statement saying how the revenue generation of GST has not been as buoyant or as high as what had been expected initially. And this can be improved if the following reforms can be made in the existing tax structure. I'll tell you why. The examiner always appreciates an answer which is written with a positive undertone. If you have a positive undertone to the answer, the examiner will appreciate it. So when you the 75% increase fact, Tushar, that I am saying is that earlier our total indirect tax collection till 2013-14, the last year for which we have good enough data, 14-15, sorry, the indirect tax collections were never beyond 6 lakh to 6.5 lakh crore, never beyond 7 lakh crore at all for the central and state government added together. From 2000 and today, if it is below 1 lakh crore, we get worried. So, the government is planning to get around 12 lakh crore to 14 lakh crore tax collection from GST. So that is the increase of 75% that I meant. You can cross-check it with Economic Survey, Volume 2, the chapter on fiscal policy. Now, coming back to my point, so how do you answer? Please understand, I repeat myself again. I am saying this is the point you bring to the examiner, and this is how you can present a table also if you remember the data. If you don't remember the data, do not present anything. Then you go ahead and tell the examiner that if these particular improvements are made, then revenue buoyancy of GST can be improved. And that revenue buoyancy part that you come across, and what can be the changes that you come across, is this. First, simplify the structure. So that is what we are now taking it to, that we will write a statement saying that revenue buoyancy has not been on expected lines. And then you can say that they can be brought on expected lines through following reforms that we can bring about. So, following reforms. So say that to improve revenue buoyancy, following reforms can be done. First is reduce number of slabs That is one. Reduce the number of slabs. Today we have 0%, 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%. Reduce it. We don't need as many. We can have 2 stacked slabs of 12% and 18% and 0% for essentials, and gradually then we can club the commodities there and we can try making it better. Along with reduction, you will write stabilize the commodity slab. In the last 2.5 years, almost now 3 years, one of the errors I see that has happened, in the last 3 years, one of the errors that I have seen in our policy making has been continuous shifting of slabs. We need to be careful. We should not be shifting the slabs so much. Commodities in 28% shifted to 18, 18 shifted to 12, suddenly 5 to 0, 0 to 3, and sub-slabs in between. So imagine, look at the confusion that a fellow will face. So in construction sector, if you are making a real estate building or you're a real estate businessman, the tax slab fixed for you is 12%. But if you are making it in affordable housing, it is 8%. But if you have taken the composite scheme, then you have to pay 1%. But if it is a composite scheme in the non-affordable sector, it is 3%. Imagine so many sub-slabs within a slab confuses people more than improving things. This is what we are referring from the first 2 points. Reduce the number of slabs and remove the commodity slab changes frequently. Rationalize the structure better. Let people in the market stabilize. Understand what tax slabs you are looking at. So this is the first 2 points that you can put forward. Then improve on reverse charge mechanism. Improve on reverse charge mechanism. So reverse charge mechanism works like this. If I am someone who has to pay GST, and as I already told you, that I can take input tax credit from the government by showing the bill that, look, I have already paid my tax to the seller who sold me my inputs. But then there are several people in India who need not be and who are not registered with GST. If I am not registered under GST, and if I am selling to someone who needs input tax credit, then in that case, that person will not get it immediately, and he will come under what is called reverse charge mechanism. The government will say, since you don't have a bill to show to me from an authentic registered seller, so we will take our time to verify, and in the meantime, you should deposit all the tax that you have taken. Now that will mean delay in input tax credit, and cascading effect doesn't go away. And this is where in reverse charge mechanism has not been implemented in India very well, because the government got a little worried in the beginning that if they implement it, people may not be willing to participate. And that resulted in a lot of delays in GST payments and receipts of input tax, and that has complicated the administration quite a bit. So we should remove these delays on input tax credit and remove the delays with respect to the reverse charge mechanism, and then can go ahead. So remember, when you reduce the number of slabs, then it means better administration, because there are lesser number of slabs to look after, and there will be lesser input tax credit delay. When you have, because remember, when you reduce it from 0, 5, 12, 18, 28 to something like a 0, 12, 18, then that means there is no frequent transition from one group to another. Inputs are charged at almost the same rate as output, so tax deduction is easier. So that gives buoyancy. Stabilize the commodity slab, and then make sure that the reverse charge mechanism is improved upon. The further thing that can be done is faster refund of IGST, especially to exporters. Faster refund of IGST, especially to exporters. This is another complaint we hear very frequently about GST, that refunds to exporters is delayed and exporters lose on their working capital. Faster refund to exporters will be very important. That refund the money to the exporters as soon as possible. One of you asked me a question, what is cascading effect? I will answer it later as I answer more, but please understand one point. These classes are mainly to train you into answer writing. So few of these terms I will expect you would know, but I'll answer cascading effect, that what does that mean? No, another question asks me, why can't we include everyone under GST? GST is not a personal tax, GST is a commodity tax. So it's not about including all people, it's about which commodities you can tax and which you cannot, and whether you want to tax the necessities and how much and so on. Now, when you come into this description again, another thing that can be done, so faster refund of IGST to people will be again quite helpful. Another benefit that you can record, or another improvement that we can record here, will be improving the GSTN network, the GST portal on which people record their transactions. So if we can improve, the GSTN network, there will be much better chance of, that is what I'm answering Dhruv Jyoti, that there is a higher chance that people can claim fake input tax, but if you can improve your GST network, GSTN portal, and record transactions much better, you can actually improve this. A lot of problem of input tax credit is because of sometimes delayed decision making, and sometimes frequent changes in the slab, and sometimes just the slow movement of the machinery. So that I think we can improve upon across these parts. Then when you look at it, another thing is remove the exemptions. That should be your next suggestion. Remove exemptions. Bring everything, all commodities like electricity, services like electricity, land, alcohol for human consumption, petroleum. So a consensus can be developed among state governments and central government, and all these commodities can be brought under the spectrum of single GST program. It becomes far easier then to administer the whole process. So that is again a factor. Multiple exemption means chances of faking invoice, chances of not showing the true dimension of the transaction. So it's important that you remove it. So please understand the structure that I have developed for you, and then we will talk about conclusion. We started the question, understand this please, and this is the purpose of these classes. We started a question on enumerate all indirect taxes. So we enumerated the indirect taxes, that all indirect taxes except all indirect taxes including central sales tax, state sales tax, octroi duty, entertainment tax, entry tax, state value added tax and central value added tax, state excise duty and central excise duty, all taxes have been subsumed under GST except the following. And then we will write tax on petroleum, alcohol for human consumption, tax on land, and tax on electricity has not been subsumed under GST. This is for the first part. Then after that, what we can do, I answer your question, Srikanth, on fake GST invoice. We'll be coming to that. Just give me a minute. And there's a question on revenue implications. Yes. We should be covering all dimensions. When they ask you revenue implications, it should be about all possible dimensions related to GST and not related to other factors. Then conclude by saying, so this is how we begin. Then if you look at it, we talked about what was GST expected to do. This you will write another 25 words. So 25 words for the introduction, 20-25 words for what GST was expected to do, and then 50 words, maybe 70 words on the benefits that GST was expected to invoke and has invoked. So 25 words for introduction, 25 words for what GST was expected to do, and then 60 to 70 words for what, 70 words in fact, for the benefits that we expected from GST. So starting from buoyancy, etc., all the benefits that we expected from GST and why buoyancy was expected. And then you can write this, give this table. Again, remember, give a table, code data, write values only when you are certain, that you understand or you remember the data very well. And then on this part, after you've written the part, write this language, that revenue buoyancy has not been on the expected lines, and this has been due to various factors. These factors can be improved upon and revenue buoyancy can be increased by following reforms. And then you can talk about the reforms of these factors. There is a question that Kanika asks me. It says, sir, the exemptions are said to come under GST after 2022 if we leave the political implications out. Well, all of us can be hopeful about that, Kanika, but I have my doubts. I don't think state governments will give up so easily unless they are not all ruled by the same political party, which I don't see happening right now. So in that case, I don't think state governments will be willing to give up their rights to tax. So I don't think 2022, and especially with the GST compensation issue we just faced in India, chances that all exemptions would be gone, please be careful. I'm quite skeptical on that at the moment. Coming back to the discussion, then after having written this, you have to conclude. In conclusion, bring out one of the other important aspects. Say, the last 2 years have seen GDP growth declining in India, and after COVID-19, GDP growth has been in negative growth category. The last 2 years have seen GDP growth declining in India, and after 2 years in the COVID-19 pandemic, GDP growth has been in negative trajectory. This challenge of slowing GDP growth can be met only by assuring, this challenge of slowing GDP growth can be met only by assuring that GST calculation, GST revenue is improved through the reforms that have been mentioned above. So that way you are concluding by telling the examiner, and this should be 35-40 words of conclusion, that I understand GDP is falling and GDP growth rate has been declining for 2 years now. So this is a challenge on GST front. So to overcome this challenge and to make sure that we can collect more revenue, and in turn if we can make GST better, then that can contribute to more GDP also by contributing to economic activities. This is my conclusion. So I repeat again, when you talk about conclusion, you should be talking about the factor that GDP growth has been declining last 2 years and has gone into negative trajectory with COVID-19. And therefore, it is more important to do the above mentioned reforms to make sure that GST revenue is collected better and can improve tax generation in India, also contributing to overall growth possibilities in India. That is how you can conclude on this when you are writing the answer. Remember, as I told you, plan your answers between 150 to 250 words. Changing 20-25 words here or there is still easier. But if you have planned your answer for only 250 and you suddenly have to write it for 150, that's trouble. So please be careful. Plan it over 150 to 250 words. I have a question here which says, is it important to also include the source of data? So Rishabh, no. You don't have to cover the source of data necessarily, but if you are writing something in a bracket, if you can write the source, it will be even better. But as long as you are writing it from an authentic source, especially Economic Survey and India Yearbook, these are the two authentic sources you guys can use very easily. Please do not use newspaper articles as your source. Please do not use newspaper articles as your source. Newspaper articles have sometimes given wrong data blatantly. And the time restricts me, otherwise I'm always filled with that how many times they have given wrong data to us. But anyways, so use Economic Survey or use India Yearbook, they are authentic, but otherwise be careful. Another question I see you asking me is that can we write data approximation? Of course, you can write approximation and write approximately this much. Like even in your answer, write it that approximately this is this much, So in that case, you tell the examiner that, look, even I am not claiming that my data is accurate. I'm only saying my data is approximate. So you will gain much better. Now, when you say the GST compensation issue, Saurabh asks me to cover that. Please understand, they will never ask you a question in UPSC which will be politically loaded in the way newspapers discuss it. So when it comes to a GST compensation issue, and with respect to how UPSC will ask us, they will ask us in this manner again. They will ask us what reforms are required so that GST compensation can be given or disputes on GST compensation can be reduced among central and state government. At most they can do that. So again, these reforms that you talk about, and talk about the administrative reforms in GST Council, that better debate in GST Council can be done so that the compensation can be given. But the idea of compensation, yes, I'm coming to that, Shreyanshi, that the structural difference between 150 and 250 words. You give me 5 minutes, I'm coming to that. But coming to GST compensation again, just answering that, the idea is this. In 2017, when the states agreed that, okay, or 16-17 that is, that we'll have a GST levied, then one of the strong conditions was that they should be allowed to have a compensation. And the central government promised them that every year, year-on-year basis, there will be a compensation given to them on the basis of 14% increment. That is, every year the compensation will rise by 14% compared to what was the compensation given last year. And the base year was set as 2014-15 revenue, which was earned by the state government. So whatever revenue is given by the state government, was earned by the state government, the central government said, we will compensate you by up to 14% in case of any shortfall in your revenue, and the increment will be 14% year on year every year. Now till 2018 there was no problem, the compensation went on. From 2018-19 the slowdown began, and as the slowdown began, GST collection started rising at a lesser rate. So it was not that GST collections were lesser. From 100 it can be 110 in the first year, and then from 110 if it is 115 in the second year, the collection has increased but the rate of growth has decreased. And that is where centers started delaying the compensation that had to be paid to the states. And the dispute began. This year, central government said initially that compensation to the states cannot be given because it's a pandemic year, and they gave the states options. They said the shortfall will be 2,35,000 crore. The states were given an option. It was said that central government will fulfill part of it, and rest of it, around 1,97,000 crore, if the states borrow on their own, then central government will allow them to borrow this and not put it in their fiscal deficit, and central government will also allow them to get them as a long-term loan. Another option was that the states do not borrow all, but borrow a part of it, but that way they will have to pay the market rate and there will be no subsidy given, and central government will give them 75,000 crore. This was the offer given by central government initially. The state governments, especially the opposition ruled states, they resisted it, and they said that this compensation method, we cannot go in that direction. The central government has now relented on that, and they have said that central government will borrow in the market and they will pay to the state government. So the matter is for the time being subsumed, it's closed. So I don't think UPSC should ask you a question on this, especially on the compensation principle part. So if you ask me, the chances that they will ask you something on compensation principle is few and far between. Chances are very few. But this was the compensation debate that had happened between the central government and the state government. The reality today is central government has said, we will borrow 1,10,000 crore from the market and we will compensate the states using those borrowings, and the other revenue compensation will be done using the cess that we are collecting, and whatever will be left over will be decided later as to how borrowings will be done. This is the reality today. You have asked me that should we write for each suggestion as you were speaking. Yes, you should write for each suggestion. Especially if you are writing a 250-word answer. So you should write for each suggestion there. And in the other, there's another thing that you have asked me. Sohinur has asked you that can we mention a line on cooperative federalism? Of course you can. That you can mention that GST can become successful like many other reforms in India, and this should be your concluding, can come under your conclusion paragraph, only when cooperative federalism principles are adhered to. So if principles of cooperative federalism are adhered to, GST can be a much better success. So in conclusion, you can always include it as a line. Why not? Coming back now to the question that Shreyanshi asked me, which is important. How do we structure it between 150 words and 250 words? Please understand, the real structuring should never be on points. It should always be on the words you use for explanation. For example, if I am writing a 250-word answer, then this initial part on enumerate all indirect taxes subsumed in GST, I will expand on that. I will initiate by saying that GST was preceded by 23 different types of taxes charged by indirect taxes, charged by central government and state government, which ranged from value added VAT, state and central VAT, excise duty, to individual octroi duty and entertainment tax. All these taxes, that is excise duty, sales tax, value added tax, octroi duty, entertainment tax, etc., have now been subsumed under GST. And then mention, after you have mentioned it, that therefore, GST includes all indirect taxes except, and then mention these, again go into details, except petroleum products like petroleum, diesel, kerosene, naphtha, etc., alcohol for human consumption, land, that is stamp duty to be paid on land transaction, and electricity, that is tariff paid by Gencoms to the Discoms to Gencoms, and tariff paid by Gencoms to the government. So explain on those parts, and from 25-30 words make it 50-55 words. Similarly, when you go further, when it comes to this part, revenue implication, you can say the central government had promised compensation to the state government, and this compensation promised to the state government was at the rate of 14% per annum, expecting revenue collections to grow at least at the rate of 14% per annum from 2014-15 onwards. This was expected because, and then elaborate on this, that what was GST expected to do, and so on, and again elaborate with more words. So rather than again writing something like these parts, the benefits of GST part, buoyancy, and then the reasons for buoyancy. So elaborate on those reasons for buoyancy to the extent that you are in a position where you are writing all those points thereafter. After elaborating on all these reasons for buoyancy, etc., then if you remember the growth rate description, go ahead, write it and explain on that. If you don't, avoid it. Just say that GST growth has been slowing down in the recent past, which has been due to problems observed in the economy within and without. And this can be improved by bringing in reforms which can improve the functioning of economic system, and then bring across this part and elaborate on these points more. So elaboration is the key. If you're writing a 150-word answer, cut down on your explanations, but keep the points intact. If you're writing on a 250-word answer, elaborate and explain more, because you have that much of word limit that you can go by. Then, yes, this is a very relevant question that Deepankar asks me. It says, how to add context to our answers to tell the examiner that we know why the question has been asked. In your introduction or conclusion, you can bring across. Like in the conclusion, you can write, the recent controversy on GST compensation would not arise if the reforms had generated revenue at a faster pace. These are the typical lines, subtle way of telling the examiner that I know that this is the debate going on in the society or my economy, and I appreciate the debate, and this is my answer to that debate. Okay. As I answered already, Pranay, it's always good to write 7-8 points with less elaboration. If your points are relevant, include all of them. But if you see points are very, off the hook, then you can elaborate more on the relevant points and only mention the less relevant points. There's another question that Akshay asks me, that exemption should be removed. Don't you think states will oppose it? I already told you that I don't think states will accept it very easily. But with consensus and with some push and pull here and some talks, I think some consensus can be arrived if political acrimony is reduced. Now I'm saving the time of the class, I will not go that side, but remember, one of the biggest problems we are facing at the moment in our system is political acrimony that we face. So this is how you should structure question 1 that I told you. I now begin with another question that was asked last year. The question was, do you agree with the view that steady GDP growth and low inflation have left India in a good shape? So the question was, this is question 2 that I'm discussing with you. Do you agree with the view that steady GDP growth and lesser inflation has benefited India. Again, they asked us this question, and that has left India in a good shape. And then they said, give reasons in support of your arguments. So they were asking for reasons in support of arguments. And this was a 10-mark question that they had asked us. So remember, this question is based on the basic idea of resource gap, that whether your resources are good enough, whether your macroeconomy is stable, and so on. So I'll come to that. You please listen to me carefully. Swati, if you could just go back to the recording and check, you'll get the recording after the class. I have already told you how to conclude the answer in the last question. You can conclude it with reforms by bringing all the reforms together, but bring along the idea of GDP growth and GST contributing to each other. Like, it's not only that GDP growth will contribute to GST, but GST will also GST reforms will also contribute to GDP growth. That, I think, will be a better way to conclude your answer. And another question that Pavjot asks me is, sir, should we use phrases or full sentences need to be written while writing points? See, when you are writing a point, if the point is relevant enough, write the entire sentence of it and explain it. Examiner will look for it. If it's a less relevant point, you can contain it. All right, but don't write half sentences. People may not appreciate it much. You can write it point-wise and then elaborate. That's okay. But don't leave it in a half sentence. Coming back to this question now on macroeconomy, please understand. Any economy, the key is macroeconomic stability. I'm not teaching you the answer to this at the moment. I'm first telling you the basis of this question. So the basis of this question was to check if you understand what we call macroeconomic stability. The idea of that. So remember, for any economic system, the key is when you talk about macroeconomic stability, that whether macroeconomy wise we are stable. Now, what does it imply when we talk about macroeconomic stability? See, please understand this. Macroeconomic stability means steady rate of GDP growth, controlled inflation, controlled fiscal deficit, and controlled current account deficit. So if my current account deficit is in control, if my fiscal deficit is in control, if my GDP growth rate is steady, and if my inflation is relatively steady or stable, then we claim that we have a macroeconomic steady system. We claim that we have a macroeconomic steady system. On the other hand, if it is not so, then macroeconomy-wise we are disturbed. All right, if it is not so, then macroeconomy-wise we are disturbed. So when you look at macroeconomic systems, this is the way we go for it. Now, let's try understanding, how do we get to the idea of macroeconomic stability in this question. They ask us, do you agree with the view that steady GDP growth plus lesser inflation has benefited India? Steady GDP growth plus lesser inflation has benefited India. Now, this was again a question that had been debated quite a bit in Indian context, that for 4 to 5 years, if you want, you can come. आओगे तो आ जाओ, कर दो उसको ठीक. So for 4 to 5 years, macroeconomic growth has been steady in India, and GDP growth has been steady in India with relatively stable inflation. I'll give you some numbers there. So starting 2014, till 2019, GDP growth on an average has been greater than 7%. Now this is how you should introduce your answer. When you introduce your answer, you should introduce in that manner that stable GDP growth combined with controlled inflation is always good for macroeconomic stability of any economy. Stable GDP growth combined with stable inflation is good for macroeconomic stability of any economy. That is what you can initiate it with. Then, since it's a 10 marker and 150 word, in one line more, explain what is macroeconomic stability. For example, say that steady GDP growth, controlled inflation, increase in controlled fiscal deficit and current account deficit are representations of stable macroeconomic system. Representations of stable macroeconomic systems. Mention it like that. After you have mentioned those, then move to the next aspect. Then say, after having mentioned those, then say that what has been the case in the recent past. So you can then mention, so you can write that between 2014 to 19, GDP growth has averaged greater than 7% and inflation has been below 4%. Average is what I'm saying. So in certain quarters it could be higher, in certain quarters it could be lesser, but the average is around that average GDP growth in the zone of 7% and inflation in the zone of 4%. That is how, say, it is taken. Then come to the benefits that it creates, because remember, so see, what are we saying? We are agreeing with the statement. We are agreeing with the statement because the data suggests so. All right, what we are saying is we are agreeing with the statement, and we are agreeing with the statement because the data suggests so. Then we'll say whether the Indian economy has benefited or not. Come to that as the next statement. Say it has resulted in creating certain benefits for Indian economy in the last few years with the steady growth pattern that has been observed. So you are again saying that I agree with the statement that stable GDP growth with inflation being low has been beneficial overall for the Indian economic system. Then come to the next part, that what are the benefits of it. Now what are the benefits of it? First is that, so that is the next part, and this is the content part of your answer. So up to this part, if you ask me, macroeconomic stability definition, introduction that Indian economy has shown stability with GST growth. So macroeconomic stability definition, then talking about Indian economy's steady growth with controlled inflation. This should cover approximately 30 to 40 words in a 150 word answer. If it was a 250 word answer, you will elaborate more on annual growth of GDP and annual inflation control and current account deficit, fiscal deficit, all parts will be brought in, and we can make it something like 60-65 words. But for a 150 word answer, we will keep it something like 30-35 words. Then after having written this, you come down to the benefits part, because this is our real component. The marks will be given mainly for this. This should be 80 to 90 words. This part that you are writing, this should be 80 to 90 words. This 80 to 90 words that we are talking about, it comes like this. Please understand this. What it comes as is, we should come in to it as improved supply chain development, with controlled inflation, complementary industries grow far faster. The input manufacturers and the output manufacturers, they interact much faster. So with controlled inflation, the complementary industries, they grow much faster. So this can be one point that we bring across, that there can be improved supply chain and there is a controlled inflation, so the complementary industries can be brought in much faster than usual. This can be one point that you bring across. Second is higher revenue generation by promoting tax buoyancy. What you asked me? So higher revenue generation by promoting tax buoyancy. All right, that since your GDP growth is rising and your economy is rising in a connected manner, so your overall revenue generation of GDP growth will become higher. So higher revenue, and India has observed that. If you look at it, now this is another point you need to be careful on. If you look at it, there has continuously been a talk that our GDP growth rate, our tax to GDP ratio has not grown as high as what we would have liked it to be. True. But imagine if your tax revenue to GDP ratio remains at 11%, which in India's case it has more or less remained, sometimes going up to 12% also. But if it remains at 11%, then think of it, if your GDP rises from $2 trillion to $2.8 trillion, your tax collection also rises from $220 billion to $308 billion. So your overall tax collection rises. Even though your tax to GDP ratio is same, but since your GDP is rising, your overall tax collection is rising along with that rising GDP. So a steady growth in GDP contributes certainly to the buoyancy that you see in the tax system. So in that case, that is the other point you will bring across, that the buoyancy to the tax system is high. And remember, this is due to high real growth that we see in GDP. Then, the third point that you can write with it, the third point that you can write is stable inflation is an encouragement to produce. Now this sounds a little counterintuitive, but please understand this. A stable inflation rate is always encouraging the producers because it gives them some higher nominal profit possibility. So if I have a higher nominal profit possibility, given my stable inflation, it encourages me to produce more. So if the inflation is in the zone of 3%, 4%, then my input prices are rising, but my input prices are not rising as fast, and my output price is also rising. So I can expect my profit to grow at the rate of 7, 8, 9% per annum, and that keeps me interested in working. So that's again an important factor when it comes to inflation invoking production. So remember, hyperinflation or very high rate of inflation and a lot of fluctuation in price, they all discourage production. But a stable inflation rate encourages production because it keeps the producer interested by offering certain nominal profit. There's a question that you asked me, that what was the supply chain point that I talked to. Remember, when you have a stable GDP growth, then a lot of complementary industries grow together. Like if you contribute to production in food processing, then those food processing industries will demand capital goods from the machine industries, and those machine industries will demand more commodities from the other industries. So it's more like a balanced growth scenario, and if the economy is growing, then many such demands keep operating, and so the entire supply chain ranging from input producer to output producer, they grow more strong, and that contributes to production possibility, and that contributes further to growth. So that was the point I was making on the supply chain point. Now, after writing this, that is stable inflation encourages your production possibilities, you can also bring across the point that higher export and remittances, I'll explain this to you, keep current account deficit in control. So what happens is that if your GDP is growing faster, then to some extent your net exports must be showing some improvement. If they are not showing improvement, you will have to then work on the events around. So if they are not showing improvement, then it's trouble, because if they are not showing improvement, then it means that this part is not operative. But otherwise, normally speaking, when an economy is growing, net exports improve, and as net exports improve, and with economic growth happening, remittances and investment flow into the country becomes high. And that gives to a better management of current account deficit, sometimes even controls the current account deficit that we see in the country. So these are the points that you will generate when it comes to supporting your answer, that these are few things that India has experienced in the last 5-6 years of steady GDP growth with comparatively low inflation. When it comes to conclusion, conclude by, I'm answering your question now, Love. Love has asked me a question that how do we connect it to current affairs? You will connect it to current affairs by concluding it and saying that a steady GDP growth has been faltering in India in the last 2 years with the decline seen in GDP growth rate, and inflation has become higher due to supply side factors like food and fuel inflation. The steady growth in GDP has faltered in the last 2 years and GDP growth rate has declined, and inflation has been seen to be higher on the higher side due to supply side inflation in the past 1 year. This is due to lack of structural reforms which India needs badly. Therefore, if we want India to have a continuity of stable growth with controlled inflation, then structural reforms like input market reforms, taxation reforms, money market reforms, bond market reforms will be needed in India. But I will be remaining quiet on structural reforms right now. We will have enough time to discuss structural reforms when I take up a different question. So if you have a question in your mind that what does it mean by structural reforms, sir, I'll be discussing it with you. There is one more question that I have not been able to answer because of the flow of the class. So I will give you the option. Please connect to me on the Telegram channel, and that is the channel created for your purpose by Next IAS, and I will answer your question on cascading effect. All right, I'll explain that cascading effect on the Telegram channel. I'll do that. So please bear with me. Due to the flow of the class, it couldn't come to me that I could tell you the cascading effect thing in the classroom. So the one who asked me the question on cascading effect, please bear with me on this. But I will be answering this cascading effect question of yours on our group that we have made, the Telegram group that we have created. Again I repeat, the conclusion should be, when you are writing on all this, the conclusion should be connecting it to the recent events. Say that the GDP growth rate has gone down and inflation has been rising, and this is due to lack of structural reforms. Just recalling this question again, then, the question wanted us to talk about, do you agree with the view that steady GDP growth plus lesser inflation has benefited India? Reasons you give in support. So we will start by first talking about macroeconomic stability, defining macroeconomic stability, and then saying that in the last few years, India has experienced steady GDP growth with stability in macroeconomic system. Write it like that. After that, you will bring across the data and you will write your points saying that what has been the GDP growth rate and what has been the inflation rate. And then the main component or content of the question, where you will talk about improved supply, higher revenue growth, all that can happen with a steady GDP. This is explanation of these parts. What I'm speaking to you right now, what I'm explaining to you. Explanation of these parts is where you should spend around 70 words. So take around 15 to 20 words to explain each of these parts. 15 to 20 words. And then after you have explained each of these parts, conclude with the last 40 words. So you have a 30 words introduction, 70, 80 words material, and then 40 words conclusion. For 250 words, elaborate on introduction, make it around 60 words. On the individual points, you can give examples of current account deficits in India in the recent past or improvement in GDP growth rate, and make it something like another 100 words, and then maybe 120 words, and then another 50, 60 words to conclude. That is how you should write it for a 20 marker. Point related to banking infrastructure, I suggest you don't add here. That will not be a very good idea. There's another question that you asked me, that how supply side inflation can be handled by government, but it is out of reach of MPC. Please don't confuse between Reserve Bank and government. Reserve Bank cannot control supply side inflation, but government can very well control supply side inflation by improving on infrastructure, improving on resource use, improving on structural reforms, and so on. I'll teach you that. Logistic cost control is within government's hand. Agricultural supply chain management is with government. So it's not that government cannot control inflation. Don't worry about that. Inflation can be controlled by government. Poor policy, sometimes lethargic policy. Okay, I'll give you an example. Just to answer that question that you asked me. We talked about a top program, Operation Green, way back in 2018. Tomato, onion, potato. And we said that this is how we will grow with tomato, onion, potato program. And this has been 2 years now, and tomato and onion and potato prices have kept showing fluctuations, high increase and so on. And we have been lethargic in our structure building, and that has kept the problem alive. So, if we can be a little more proactive, we can control these problems. Don't worry. Okay. Yes, Saptanshi, right. What you are writing is right, Safreshi. Then we come to the aspect. No, you don't have to mention the negative aspects of low inflation. Remember, inflation here is an overall price increase. So do not connect it to only crops or only a particular commodity. Low inflation, 3%, 4% is always healthy for producers in the manufacturing and production market. So take it as that, rather than connecting it to individual commodities, then it will create confusion in the mind. Inflation is a macro concept. All commodity prices taken on an average. So if you take it on individual commodities like agricultural commodities, etc., then the micro concept will create a problem. So please don't do that mistake. No, unemployment is not a result of low inflation, Lokesh. Unemployment results when your economy falls, if your inflation is both from demand side and supply side. India has enough scope to grow better, employ more people, and still keep the inflation in check. Your food inflation, fuel inflation, infrastructure loss, lack of infrastructure support, that and logistical cost inflation, all these inflations, if controlled, will have nothing to do for unemployment. Rather, they will encourage the investments to come in more, and that will encourage higher production and higher employment. So please don't go by standard macroeconomics every time. Apply yourself that which kind of inflation are we talking about. Developed countries can afford these theories that low inflation will mean low employment because they have only demand side to cater to. We have both demand side and supply side. I'm deliberately expressing all these answers in the class because I need all in the class to understand this. That when you talk about saving and inflation, supply side, demand side inflation, growth. So you can have very well good growth with inflation in control if you can manage your supply side as a developing economy. So please be careful there. If my supply becomes more, I can still produce more at a lesser cost. And that will mean inflation can be low. So that ways you can implement it. There are two more things you ask me. You ask me that in arguments, do we give positives and negatives both? We are not arguing for inflation. So it's always good that you talk better on only stability part, higher stability. Capital goods part you can include. One of you have asked me that. You can link it to demographic dividend, but the words will not be there. So I suggest don't link it to demographic dividend. Do not link it to currency appreciation, depreciation also, because exports do not play a major role due to depreciation, appreciation. Of course, it's a valid point, but here it will not hold true. Now, when you look at it, again, I already told you, Saptarshi, so if you could revert when you see the recordings, that high GDP leads to supply chain betterment by complementary growth of commodities. That is how the high GDP leads to that. So, this is how you can take it per se actually. Okay, then when you look at the whole event of this question, please remember, ultimately you have only 150 words to answer this question. So begin with the basic idea of macroeconomic stability, then talk about the whole basis of this stability in India, why India could grow, and see that is the basis. India could grow like this because in spite of rising demand in India, supply could keep rising and keep pace with it, so inflation could be kept under control. And most of the times if you will see inflation happening in India, it's mostly from supply side rather than from demand side, and more often than not cases. Food inflation is a very big cause, fuel inflation is a very big cause, poor logistical cost is a very big cause. So that is what you should keep in mind. All right, then I take you to the next question. The next question that we now discuss, it says, how far is integrated farming system helpful in sustaining agricultural production? All right, this is our third question. How far is integrated farming system helpful in sustaining agricultural development? That is what the question asks us, that how far is integrated farming system helpful in sustaining agricultural production? Now please understand, and this was for 10 marks, so again 150 words. Such questions are normally for 10 marks. The examiner knows that you don't have much to write in these questions except the facts and then the analysis of those facts. But you know, before I take you into the discussion on this question, I need you to understand a point. With all such questions, a very good source to get an answer to these questions is reading Economic Survey. This was taken from the Economic Survey of 1819, this question. So if you read Economic Survey, you will start getting your answers from there. And the second aspect that you can bring across is sometimes reading the sections on agriculture, section on commerce, section on poverty from India Yearbook. These are places from where your examiners pick up the questions at times. You know, this integrated farming system was there in India Yearbook and was there in Economic Survey also. So since it was there in both these places, it was relatively easier, you know, for those who had read it to answer this question. Now when you come over to this whole idea, you know, of the integrated farming system, begin by defining what is integrated farming system. All right. So first you say that under integrated farming system, so begin by the definition of it, that agricultural production. So when it comes to structuring the answer, structure, first part should be introduction. And that introduction should be definition of IFS, integrated farming system. So say that integrated farming system is something that takes agricultural farming beyond monocropping and introduces livestock management, pisciculture, horticulture, along with other normal crop management practices of agriculture. So an integrated farming system means that you develop multiple sources of earning for the farmer. Why will they ask you this question? Because this is one of the programs by which government plans to double farmers' income. That is why they will ask you integrated farming system. So when you are writing your introduction, include this word of doubling farmers' income. That whole word, that whole idea of doubling farmers' income should be there with the definition of IFS. So you define IFS, you say that holistic practice introduced in agriculture, including increase in agricultural production from monocropping to multiple cropping, and introducing livestock management, cattle management, horticultural developments, and so on, is integrated financial system. Once you have introduced integrated financing system, then come down to the benefit of it. And that should be the body of your answer. So this should again be something like 25 words, 25 to 30 words for a question which is of 10 marks. If it was a 20 marks question, if it was a 250 words question, then you are writing it a little more, maybe another 10 words, 15 words elaboration you can bring in, but 25, 30 words for a 10 marker. And after having written these 25, 30 words, then comes the component part, and that component is your real aspect, the benefits of integrated farming system. And you know, interestingly, Economic Survey had listed these benefits on integrated farming system. They had listed it down, that these are the benefits A, B, C, D of integrated financing system. So, you know, be careful. Integrated farming system benefits. Similarly, in this year's Economic Survey also, they've given you several boxes. So from mains point of view, I suggest you must have a reading there, even though in the classes, in these classes itself, I will be covering some important questions which I feel are relevant from your mains this year, point of view. So from Economic Survey, I have covered few questions which we will be discussing. So the benefits when it comes to, you can begin like this. First is increased productivity, because with integrated farming, even overall productivity with better farm management will come into picture. So you will have a better farm management and higher productivity with integrated farming system. So increased productivity should be your first point. The second point can be higher employment. If you reduce the pressure of population on land, a lot of disguised unemployment will go away. So higher employment opportunities come in. If you reduce the pressure of population on land, then higher employment opportunities can come across. And that will mean disguised unemployment going away, and this new employment opportunities again will help you generate better returns to the farmers. Always keep connecting it to the returns that the farmers can make with respect to the opportunities created by the system here. Then along with that, so higher employment opportunities here should include removing disguised unemployment, should also include creating more avenues with multiplier effects. For example, if you develop a non-farming source of income for the farmer, then the farmer will get higher income. They will spend that money in the rural area. So somebody else will get some other activity to do. For example, a system like transportation activity, entertainment. These are non-farming activities completely. Farmer getting buoyed by the extra money that he is getting will then add further to other person's capacity to work and earn income. That is the multiplier impact of any income generation. That's again a better idea that you can introduce. Third is ecological sustenance. Because integrated farming system has ecological sustenance inbuilt in it. In the integrated farming system, you make sure that you teach the best farming technique which has agroclimatic suitability. So if the farming technique that you are introducing has agroclimatic suitability, then ecological sustenance will be better. Since the pressure on soil will be less, problems like soil erosion, problems related to extra use of water, degradation of land, you can cover all that and ecological sustenance can come in. See, I'm discussing all these points with you because these are the points with which you will elaborate in your answer. These are the points I'm giving you, but these are the ways in which you will elaborate your answer. And then apart from that, it will also mean profitability to the farmer. I'll tell you what word to use here, converting the farmer into an entrepreneur. With integrated farming system, we will teach the farmer how to be an entrepreneur. So converting the farmer into an entrepreneur is what we will try doing here. And that will mean increased profitability, increased returns for the farmer. And then we can introduce here that, and when you use the word profitability, please use the term increased possibility to earn, for the farmer by working on the field and acting as an entrepreneur. I repeat again. So the idea is that train the farmer in modern techniques, make the farmer understand the market system, let the farmer grow and not remain unemployed during the off-season of agriculture, and practice those things like say beekeeping, pisciculture. They are all a part of integrated farming system and contribute to extra sources of income using the word profit rather than wage. So the farmer is not earning wage rate anymore. The farmer will be able to earn better profitability. And then you can of course bring in and write that it gives financial security to rural India, which is very important because once you practice this integrated farming system, financial security comes into picture because when people will have a surplus, that surplus will turn into savings. And when they have savings, then in bad times, they can at least go back and use those savings for better and higher returns. So, so that is the aspect of it. And then conclude by saying that it will result in doubling farmers' income, supporting the farmer, and be a key ingredient in assuring that you have some balance in use of resources. So combine all these points and then conclude. So in your conclusion, so when you write these 5 points, this should be approximately 80 to 90 words. You may end up writing 100 words, I'm okay, because this will be around 15-20 words explanation for each that we are talking. And those 20 words happen very quickly when it comes to explaining things in the paper. So approximately 15 to 20 words explanation. We complete that over 90 to 100 words, 30 words introduction, 30 words, 90 to 100 words this, and 30 words conclusion. Conclusion should focus on doubling farmers' income, resource utilization, and ecological support. Conclude by combining these. Like, you can say that programs like, and use all these points to conclude. So you can say programs like integrated farming system help in better resource utilization. They help in integrated methods of farming resulting in financial security and ecological sustainability, which will help in overall growth of Indian agriculture. So the focus should be all the points taken together, you take them up and say that all this will result in a wholesome growth, holistic growth, sustainable development of Indian agriculture. So focus like that or work it out like that. In case you're writing a bigger answer, if you're writing it for 250 words, otherwise no. If you're not writing it for 250 words, then you don't include it. If you're writing for 250 words, the elaborations will increase. So for these 5 points, you will start writing around 25-30 words each, 25 words each. And there will be 2 more points that you can write. One point that you can include, if it is for 250 words, I repeat again, is that better export possibility. Agro-commodity exports can increase because of integrated farming system. Surplus can be produced, farmers can be trained to be more efficient, and better export possibilities can arise. So if you are writing a 250-word answer, then bring that across. If it is not a 250-word answer, then avoid it. Please don't get into that. But if it's a 250-word answer, write better export possibility, which can earn higher foreign exchange reserves for India, and so on. And another point that you can use is modernization of agriculture by introducing things like organic farming, horticulture, etc. So this can be a separate point that you can introduce when you are writing a 250-word answer. If it's a 150-word answer, you are already word constrained. These are the stories I teach you. These are stories to tell the examiner. They don't have theoretical support much. If I read economics, I will not get a lot of theoretical support for this. But when it comes to practical economic system, we get a lot of support on these. So, that way, these 2 points can add further. These 2 points are missing in the answer booklet that I have given you. Please include them while revising the class. So 6th point and 7th point, better export possibility and modernization of agriculture with organic or horticultural farming. These 2 points are missing in the answer sheet that I have given you. Please include these 2 points also. And if you elaborate another 20 words on these points of 25 words, it will complete your 250 words answer in case they ask you one. But chances that they will ask you a 250-word answer on these topics is very rare. Then I take you into the next question. The question says, it's an easy question. That is why I know that we have relatively less time, but we have 10 minutes. And I think since this is an easy question, I can cover it today itself. So this is 4th question. The question says that we have today, the question says that it is argued that the strategy of inclusive growth is intended to meet the objectives of inclusiveness and sustainability together. All right? So the link to inclusive growth, that the idea of inclusive growth includes inclusiveness and sustainability together. So it says, it is argued that the strategy of inclusive growth is intended to meet the objectives of inclusiveness and sustainability together. Comment on this statement. Now see, when it comes to it, the idea is not only to include people in the growth process, but also to sustain their recovery from bringing them out of poverty and including them in the growth process and so on. So inclusiveness and sustainability. Include people in the growth process, inclusiveness and sustainability. So include people in the growth process and sustain that growth process. Now this sustainability is economic sustainability and ecological sustainability. Both the interpretations come in there, that the sustainability part will consist of economic sustainability and ecological sustainability. So both those parts will be in the picture. All right, so when you are explaining it, you are considering both of these. Now answering it is relatively easier, hence I chose this question. You will begin by defining what is inclusive growth. And this was a 15 marks question, 250 words that they expected you to write. So around 250 words they wanted you to write. So when it comes to writing this up, 15 marks is what they asked for. So when it comes to writing this up, you should be writing over here, you should be writing or beginning with the idea of inclusiveness. So you should write inclusiveness means developing better physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, development of removal of poverty, removing inequality, making people more equitable. Begin by defining inclusivity, that what is meant by inclusion. Then bring in this idea that sustainability with inclusiveness will mean both economic sustainability and ecological sustainability. Then give a statement. The statement should be, government in the recent past has been working for both economic and ecological sustainability by promoting inclusive growth through proactive policy measures. Government in the recent past has been working on inclusive growth by proactive measures and both ecological sustainability and economic sustainability. These measures are, and then start talking about what steps can be taken, have been taken, and what those measures are. So you can mention measures like Saubhagya, measures like Bharat Mala, measures like BharatNet program for internet connectivity all over India. These are the measures you can start talking about. You can talk about Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, urban as well as rural, Shahri or Grameen. So all these programs of the government, you can start talking on these, that these are the steps that the government has taken for upgrading the standard of living, using JAM Trinity for direct benefit transfers, Ujjwala Yojana, Kusum scheme. All these schemes you can bring across, then Swachh Bharat Yojana, Mission Indradhanush for health care development, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan that the government runs, right to education for educational development. So, mention these points, and this is the important aspect of this question, that this should be around 150, 160 words, that the steps taken by the government to promote inclusion. Once we have developed these steps taken by the government to promote inclusion, then again bring that across with the institutional support for sustainability. That say that we need more institutional support, and say that sustainability will mean that the delivery mechanism is kept continuous and new schemes are launched. So you are mentioning these, then you are mentioning inclusion, the policies, and then the steps taken regarding that. And then say that the new schemes that have been launched, these new schemes will need legislative support, they will need institutional support. For example, if you are launching a scheme like Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, but you don't have a legislation to make sure that crop cutting evaluation is done on time, if you don't have institutions to make sure that this reporting reaches the people on time, then you will not be able to succeed in the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. And if you don't succeed in Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana or Krishi Sinchai Yojana, then you don't expect your farmers to get rid of middlemen or arhatiyas, because they are then dependent on them, because they can't be entrepreneurs. So be careful, one reform at one place will support the other one happening somewhere else. You can't expect agriculture to turn market-wise, or poors to start trusting banks, or poors to start trusting money markets immediately. You have to educate them. You will have to create institutions. So microfinancing institutions, self-help groups, these are the institutions that you need. And sustainability depends on these institutions. So once the social auditing of the programs you have launched, that whatever programs you have launched, you must have a social auditing done of that. Once you introduce that, then only your programs can become sustainable. And once they become sustainable, your economy will have high growth rate with inclusion and sustainability of both economy and ecology. So I've given you the detailed answer in the sheet that I've given you. So go through that and you will check across. Now today I was deliberately a little slow. There are a few points I wanted to make before we say bye-bye to each other. Today I was deliberately a little slow. We will increase the speed from tomorrow a little bit and then thereafter, because I will believe that you will have more accessibility to questions. So for tomorrow, I suggest you should read all the other 6 questions that are in the PDF that you will get. And tomorrow we will upload another PDF with 14 more questions. Tomorrow we will double our strategies. We will try covering around 7-8 questions tomorrow and so on. So don't worry, I'll manage the speed, it's in my mind, and I'll manage the course. Important is that you keep revising and going through the PDFs that we keep giving you. In between, I will also develop structure of an answer on the board for you, that how exactly an entire answer should be written. Today I'm trying to teach you how to write things in a structured manner depending on whether it is a 150 marker or a 250 marker. Another request I have is that make sure that your knowledge base is continuously improved. Please do not remain on a single newspaper as all source of information. It's just a little better than remaining dependent on WhatsApp as all source of information. Just a little better, because then a single newspaper is deciding what you are thinking. That should not be the case. You should read a little diverse, and little diverse means read few chapters on economic survey. For people among you who are appearing mains, I will put those chapters on the group today. So economic survey chapters, certain chapters from India Yearbook, and they will certainly help you in developing your acumen on answering questions like these. That where you will rather need more of government programs and analogies to prove your point rather than only writing or hitting on the bush. Because generally I see people writing a lot of metaphysics over here. Inclusion means this and people should be included. No, you don't need to write all that. Put in government programs, write concrete. Then only marks come. Ultimately we are preparing for an exam and we need our marks. So you go through the model answer that I have given you. The PDF will be uploaded and you will be able to see it. Go through the model answer to this, and then from tomorrow we will pace up ourselves, and please revise the next 6 questions at least, preview, and then we will discuss them as I see you in the class tomorrow. Thank you. It was very good interacting with you today. Thanks a lot.